Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. I am Ramon Mejia here. I'm bringing you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. This week I have 10 new LitRPG reviews for you. But before we get to that, I want to give a quick shout out to some new supporters of the podcast. Matt Ryan became a Patreon supporter for the podcast. He decided to give $6 a month, which is amazing, to help support cover the cost of making the podcast every week. Also, Tanya Rochester is amazing as well. She has donated $1 a month via PayPal, which is not a thing I knew you could do, like a recurring monthly thing. So I'm like, oh, cool, learned something new. So thank you, Tanya, as well for your generous support. Every dollar does help. So thank you, everyone, for being such great supporters. On to some of the stories we'll be talking about this week and giving reviews for. We'll be beginning the show with later The Wizard, Dungeon Core Book 1. We'll also be reviewing The Void, Alpha Source. Then onto Food City, Moderation Online Book 1. Then we'll be reviewing Fantasy Online Polynya. Then The Accidental Warrior, a LitRPG Accidental Traveler Adventure. And then The Greystone Chronicles Book 1, IO Online. Then Sphiel Song, a LitRPG adventure, fantasy adventure. And then after that, it'll be Darkworlds London, a Cthulhu LitRPG. And then Morningwood, Everybody Loves Large Chest, Volume 1. And then last is going to be Nemesis, the Panguardia Online Book 1, which I totally forgot to put the picture up for. So there we go. Panguardia Online Book 1. Nemesis. Okay, but of course, we begin our show, though, with LitRPG news. Technical issues today, folks. Technical issues. Okay, LitRPG news. I have a couple stories for you, folks. We'll begin with The Unbound Deathlord by Edward Castle. He's having a nice countdown sale, apparently, for you folks this weekend. Currently, it's at $1.99 for the large volume of that it is. So that is going on. It's going to be available in US and UK stores, apparently. Also, Omegaverse Volumes 1 through 3 is also having a countdown sale. It will be starting on October the 26th. And then, this is kind of a nice story. Earth Online's author, Gabriel Rathweg, he has his 5th book coming out today, or this week, actually. That's already come out. But he's actually donating 50% of the proceeds for those sales to hurricane relief in Puerto Rico. So that's really nice and generous. Just want to make sure you folks knew about that. So if you're going to pick it up, nice way to support an author who's giving half the money he makes from it to a good cause. So there you go. Okay, these are some other stories that are out now. Haven't reviewed them yet. Hopefully, they're all going to be LitRPG stories. That includes Nascent, the Stork Tower Book 1. Also out now is Gamer Guide Book 2, Going Rogue. And also out is Redeemer of the Dead, a LitRPG Apocalypse, the System Apocalypse Book 2, written by Tao Wang. This is the sequel to Life in the North, if you haven't read. If you don't recognize the cover art or the author's title, that one was pretty good. I enjoyed it personally. Also out now is The Pantheon Moves, Amarillo Book 10 from Michael Chatfield. And of course, we just mentioned Earth Online, Book 5, Episode 5, I should say. A nice stoner LitRPG. Also out is Witch Doctor, a LitRPG short story by Ed Branch. And then J.A. Cipriano's 4th book in the Legendary Builder series, The Builder's Wrath, is out as well. The author has been putting these out almost every couple of weeks. So I'm like, wow, that is impressive. I know Jason Cipriano he writes fast, much faster than I do. Also out now is Camelot Dungeon, an Arthurian LitRPG from Galen Wolfe. So he actually has Galen Wolfe has 2 books out right now in the LitRPG community, Camelot Dungeon, and also the Cthulhu one we're reviewing this week. Okay, out in new audiobooks, we're going to begin with The Dungeon Child, Slime Dungeon Chronicles, Book 3. Also out is Escape from Hell, a LitRPG adventure, Kingdom of Heaven. a collaboration from J.A. Cipriano and Connor Cressley. And Fantasy Online Polynya. We're reviewing the ebook version this week, but the audiobook version by Jeff Hayes is also out. And honestly, this is one of the few series I like the audiobooks better than the ebooks generally. So Jeff Hayes does an amazing job in making it extra humorous and funny. Also out is The Land, Book 5, The Swarm. So go get that if you're waiting for it, and I'm sure a lot of people have been. Okay, upcoming LitRPGs, just where I let you know what's coming up the next couple weeks and months. We have some new entries, so pay attention if you're interested. On the October 28th, only a couple days away, we have the second book in the Tower of Babel series called Layer King. And this is the sequel to Speedrunner. If you've read that one, this is hopefully going to be as good or better. Also out on the 31st of October is going to be Awaken Online Retribution. This is not a sequel. This is a side story in the same universe from a different character. So don't get your hopes up that it's, the next book in the series. It's a side story. So hopefully it'll be as good. Also out on the 31st is going to be Beginner's Luck, Character Development Book 1 by Aaron J. I'm actually did a author interview with this particular author. It'll be out on the 31st when that novel comes out. So look forward to you guys checking that out next week. Also out in November on the 6th is going to be Underworld Level Up by Apollo Thorne. On the November the 8th, it is going to be Desertborn, Pateria Online Book 2. On the November the 15th, this one's new, of course, Dungeon Calamity, the Divine Dungeon Book 3 is going to be out. On November the 16th, Shatterlands Book 3. On November the 17th, it'll be The Airship, a futuristic dungeon core laboratory book 2. And here's one that people have been looking forward to for a long time. The Land, Predators, Chaos Seed Book 7 finally has a release date, or hopefully this is a solid release date, of November the 19th, 2017. I'm sure everyone's looking forward to catching that one. Also on the 22nd of November, it's going to be Eden's Gate, The Sands. And then November the 30th, Infinite Assassins Daggerland Online Novel Book 2 in that series. On December the 4th, Twilight Obelisk, Mirror World Book 4. December the 13th, this one's new, Desert Storm, Pateria Online Book 3. And this one is new as well. On January the 24th, all the way in January of next year, the publishers are letting us know that it's out. It's up for pre-order. The Reapers, which is going to be the Nero book number 3 in that series. So there you go. Now we're going to be on to new releases and reviews. Okay, and new releases and reviews. We're going to begin with. I actually decided this week to do things a little bit differently. I decided to just kind of knock out all the stories. The reviews were those novels aren't actually LitRPG. Just get them out of the way so everybody knows real quick. Not LitRPG. And some of these aren't being deceptive in any way, shape, or form. I think just they show up on the LitRPG list when I do an Amazon search, and they sound like they might be. So I read them, and I'm letting you know whether they are or not. The first 3 qualify as not actually being LitRPG. Beginning with The Wizard Dungeon Core by M.J. Kaltenbrunner. This one is 246 pages, $4.99, available on Kindle Unlimited, and it's just not LitRPG. It's a dungeon story eventually. About 25% into this novel, you actually get some Dungeon Master stuff. And by Dungeon Master stuff, I mean, that's what I call stories where it's like a dungeon core who's sentient and makes, traps in dungeons and kills adventurers, along the lines of the Divine Dungeon or the Slime Dungeon Chronicles. Those are all Dungeon Master stories for me. And this story is fantasy. It's not LitRPG. There are no game mechanics, any kind of progression system, unfortunately. Instead, it's everything that the dungeon is like, because of magic magic wave wanding. So that is unfortunate. And only about 30, maybe 40%, if you're stretching it, is actually about the dungeon itself. Everything else is just a straightforward fantasy novel. So there are much better dungeon stories, in my opinion, including the Divine Dungeon, Slime Dungeon Chronicles, a futuristic dungeon core. There are much better dungeon master stories where there is a level of progression within the story, and this has none of that, unfortunately. So there you go. There's no review score on it because, it's not advertising as LitRPG, so I'm not going to give it a bad review. Instead, it's in part of the description was it is inspired by old school RPGs, which I thought, okay, maybe this is, and it does show up on like a search of LitRPG on Amazon. Because it's not advertising as LitRPG. I'm not going to give it a bad score because it's not saying it's something when it's not. Okay, and that's kind of the same review for The Void Alpha Source, a novella by Michael T. Jacobs. This is 151 pages, $2.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. This is from the author of a couple of actual LitRPG novels, including Soul Linked Origins and World at War Online, both of which I consider LitRPG. So I thought, okay, maybe this was going to be another LitRPG story. It's not, though. And again, the author doesn't advertise it on Amazon as a LitRPG story. There are no RPG mechanics. It's set in a virtual sci-fi universe where people have uploaded their minds to a kind of game system for like a sense of immortality. But again, the only mechanic that can maybe consider game-like is like a respawn system, which is why they're immortal as long as the servers are active. But everything else in the novel really does have like a cyberpunk sci-fi feel. And I think like the author was trying to go for a vibe of like Ultra Carbon, I should say, with Takeshi Kovacs, if you've ever read that novel. I feel like that's the kind of vibe the author was going for. But again, not advertising LitRPG, doesn't get a bad review score. It's just like, oh, letting you guys know because, again, it does show up in the search results when you're looking for LitRPG on Amazon as something that's there. So just letting you know. Okay, now the next one actually is advertising as LitRPG. Written by Michael Laron. Laron. Food City, moderation online. I'll read you the author's description. The lit RPG series that will make you scratch your head and then say, "This is awesome." The year is 2067. Obesity becomes the number one killer of humanity. People are dying younger than ever, and doctors are powerless to stop the pandemic. The only salvation is an experimental treatment, a virtual reality called Moderation Online, where patients live in a fantasy kingdom and vegetable NPCs that subconsciously teach humans how to make better choices in life. Kendall Barnes is the newest entrant into this idyllic world, African American, obese, diabetic, and a survivor of a heart attack. The game is his last chance at a normal life. But as the doctors download him into the game, hackers inject a virus into the world, an evil civilization of processed foods whose sole goal is to destroy everything in the game by brainwashing humans and slaughtering vegetables. Kendall falls under their spell. When the game developers introduce a patch to challenge the virus, a group of terrorist vegetables who fight back against the processed foods, Kendall finds himself in the middle of an epic food fight where the vegetables take him hostage, but he questions everything when he discovers that maybe the vegetables aren't the bad guys after all. So there you go. The author also mentions that the stories it's inspired by Final Fantasy and JRPGs. It's fast-paced, funny, etc., etc. It is 225 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And again, I think part of this is either the author doesn't understand exactly what is LitRPG, or he's kind of trying to qualify it under the concept that it's set in a game, because he actually is upfront about what his story does not have. Like at the very beginning of his novel, he says, "Oh, this is not, a traditional LitRPG story. It doesn't, even though there is a game, it doesn't focus on that, rather what it represents. There aren't any RPG mechanics." And I'm like, that not having RPG mechanics or game mechanics in your novel is kind of what makes LitRPG different from just video game fiction. And so right off the bat, the author is at least upfront about letting you know what his story is and isn't. So that unfortunately does also mean that it's not actually lit RPG. But just on a personal level, I could absolutely see this being a lit RPG story because it is set in a game, and there are these moments where you're like, oh, that there could be an experience notification there, or a level up notification, or like a power description there, and it's just really unfortunate because the story is weird and wacky and funny. But it is just isn't lit RPG. It is just set in a game, and that's kind of the only premise of it being any RPG mechanics. There was one instance, I should say, where the human character Kendall does level up, but it's vague, not really described. And that in the entire 225 pages, that's kind of it. You know what I mean? So I'm like, oh well, it could have really been a Liberty story had the author just gone in and like put some mechanics in. But I understand that not everybody wants to do that sort of thing. But in that, it's just really just kind of this weird, trippy story of healthy food versus junk food, with humans kind of the pawns in between. And it's very action oriented, but again, it's weird. It's just not LitRPG. I'm not saying it's bad or anything. It's just you know anthropomorphized junk food and vegetables killing each other. So it's kind of a weird thing, but again, it's not LitRPG, so it is advertised as such, though. So I have to give it a bad score. It's 4 out of 10 for not being LitRPG like it says, but there you go. Otherwise, it's not horrible. It's just kind of weird. And again, the personal story that the author tells you about makes all this make sense in a sort of way. At the back of the book, the author reveals, his personal journey in having health issues and having like this weird, almost psychedelic trip when he's in the hospital, and that inspires this novel. And it's like it's weird. I happen to like word personally, so I didn't have a horrible time with it, but I understand. Okay, it's not literature, and I wish it was. Okay, so there you go. Now on to some other stories that are actually RPG, including Fantasy Online Polynya, a lit RPG saga written by Harmon Cooper. Okay, this one's a pretty easy review. 422 pages, $5.98, available on Kindle Unlimited. It is, I'll read you the author's description. The Mither figures are back and ready to bring the fight to the Shinigami. Before they can do that, they need an audience with a Knight of the Non-Compos Mentis, the most powerful guild in Britannia. Like for them, Ryuki used to be a member of the famed guild, and to get the guild to their headquarters, they'll need to level up and figure out a way into a city with heightened security. Along their journey to Polynya, the second floating continent of Britannia, the Mitherfickers are joined by a high elf whose village is being terrorized by a big bad wolf. Hijinks and violence ensue as they attempt to rid the village. There's a lot of other stuff you need to know about. Basically, most of the stories center around going action, adventure, comedy, humor stuff as they try to get to this next island to solve some issues. It's an easy review. It's entertaining. It's as funny and action-packed as the first one, if not more so. The group at the beginning of the story is just reeling from the unexpected betrayal that happened in the end of book one, and Ryuk and his team are really just working to get to the next island and try to figure out what's happening with that betrayal, and also the main character's doppelganger. That's that person who's been posing as him and doing naughty things in on the online world. Basically, if you like book one, book two is the same crazy antics. It's as simple as that. I kind of note that for some reason when I'm reading the story, I have a really hard time focusing on the print version, on the ebook version, I should say. For me, it's much easier to either do a text to speech program or to listen to the audiobook by Jeff Hayes, which is Amazeballs. So I would definitely recommend, if you're having the same issue, like for whatever reason, maybe it's because like all the different words, having a hard time focusing on the ebook version, go listen to the audiobook. It's definitely worth the investment for me. But for me, it gets a score of 7 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, on to our next story, The Accidental Warrior, written by C.J. Davis and Jamie Davis. So I believe that's a husband and wife team. So I'm like, oh, how cute. Okay, I'll read you the author's description. An old friend in need, a fantasy game world, and a reluctant hero. Hal Dix has success at home after his initial outing into the world of Phantasma. He leveled up both in his job and at home. Everything was going fine in his life. Then, Mage Tildy, the elder, showed up again with news from the other world. His friend was in trouble, and only he could help. Hal didn't want to be a hero, but he wasn't the sort of fellow to leave a comrade behind. Whisked away to the game world of Phantasma once again, Hal enters the role of the reluctant hero he thought he left behind. Okay, there you go. This is 347 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Overall, this is basically a streamlined version of book one, The Accidental Thief. And if you like that novel, you're going to like this one. It has essentially the same plot points. And I mean, it's not exactly the same, but the same idea of chosen one, plucked from the earth, tossed into the game world, levels up on a character while having adventures and learning how to use his new skill set, saving the day, overthrowing another kingdom, whatever. That's the plot of the first book, and that's what this is. It's slightly different, but for some reason, it's not boring still. Even though you kind of know what's coming if you've read book one, it's different enough, and there's enough differences in the game mechanics that it is still interesting, at least for me. And again, this one is again more streamlined in that you get to the stuff. Why for me, anyway, I got to the stuff that I liked a lot quicker in the story. Like by the 7% mark, um, all the interest, all like reminding you of who everybody is done, and the main character is on the road to adventure in the game world. Got this new class already, and then by the 14% mark, bam, already gone. So within like 30 pages, you're already in the game world, going on adventures, killing stuff, becoming a better warrior for the main character. So that was good to me. That got me where I like to be a lot quicker. The main character again is reset on both a personal and game level in this particular sequel, which I'm I'm not sure how you feel about it, because on one level, okay, you kind of have to reset the main character because at the end of book one, super overpowered thief class, right? Can kill basically anybody, bunch of great skills, and so for him to do that same kind of power curve level up, he kind of has to reset in some way. And so the way the author does that is by kind of when he chooses to change classes to warrior, he loses access to all the other skills he had as a thief, as a master thief, until he raises his warrior level up to the same point. And so that's a fine way to do it. If you're looking for more progress like that, from book one to book two, you might be slightly disappointed. For me, I like the idea of, okay, we get to start over, and I'm assuming the same thing's going to happen in book three when it's like the accidental mage will change classes again and start that same journey. For me, I was really okay with that. The part was less okay with was resetting his personal life. Like at the end of book one, the author does a really good job, like saying, oh, the things he learned in the game world transferred over to his real life, where he's more confident. He's learned how to um, be a more powerful person in real life. Um, and I thought that was cool because it showed actual character progression. But at the beginning of book two, that is kind of reset a bit as well. And at the end of book two, it's not really shown that there is that same character progression in real life, I should say. So slight, negative on that. But overall, had a really good time with the book. Again, don't expect like a lot to be different from book one and book two as far as like plot points go, but like the actual individual fights, adventures, scenery stuff, all that is different. So there is enough difference for me at least to be entertaining still, but not surprising in any way, I guess. So there you go. I had a good time with it. Score of 7 out of 10. Okay, on to our next review, which will be the Greystone Chronicles, Book 1, IO Online, written by Dave Wilmarth. Dave Wilmarth, unfortunately, his book came out this last weekend, at the same time that the last review of this in the podcast is, and that one had some plagiarism issues. So his unfortunately his debut novel kind of got overshadowed by that, unfortunately. So I want to make sure he gets a nice bit of time. It is a whopping 650 pages on Amazon, $2.99, available on Kindle Unlimited. Now, full disclosure, I got an advanced review copy. I bought the novel as soon as it came out, of course. But on like my advanced review copy, it was like 800 and something pages, which happens between like the version the authors have, that they write, and how Amazon decides to translate that. But still, 650 pages on Amazon is like, that is a massive, massive novel. And at $2.99, it's a really good deal. It's like 50 cents a page. Even nicer on Kindle Unlimited if you have it. I'll read you the author's description. In the later half of the 21st century, Alexander and his guildmates play IO Online for fun and earn a living. It's the largest VR MMORPG on the planet, and the source of income that supports many families around the globe. While completing a rare first kill dungeon in hopes of epic loot, they discover that demons who have not been seen in the realm for ages have once again invaded Io. Given the chance to test a new experimental immersion system, the friends must give up their high-level characters and begin at level 1 again. As they work through the Noob Zone quest, they discover that their new immersion system allows them to play in ways that had not been possible before. Casting is faster, movement more fluid, even magic itself behaves differently. They quickly run afoul of a party of player killers and become the targets of an entire PK guild bent on spawn camping them until they leave the game. War has been declared. The fight expands into populated areas where innocent citizens are murdered and player accounts are terminated. The guild works to help citizens rebuild what has been destroyed, but are repeatedly forced to stop and defend against enemy attacks. After the god of Io and a powerful being of darkness get involved, Alexander and his friends learn the hard way that their in-game actions have consequences, both in-game and in the real world. So there you go. Okay. I should also disclose that the author is a Patreon supporter for the podcast. I'd honestly kind of forgotten about it until I was like posting on a previous episode. It's one of the cases of a LitRPG fan becoming a LitRPG author, and his Patreon support has no bearing on the review whatsoever. If the novel sucked, I would still say that it sucked. But just letting you know, that that's the case. So there you go. Okay. The author's debut novel it's entertaining. It has some issues though. And some of these issues kind of slow down the pacing of the story a little bit, but I'll let you know what I mean there. Okay. The story starts off right in the action in game. The main character, Alexander, playing the world's most popular VR MMO with his three friends. The author really does a really good job of introducing RPG mechanics from the very first pages of the novel, which I definitely appreciated. There's no ambiguity about is this LitRPG? Isn't nope. Front page, first pages, bam, there you go. From there, the novel spends the first 25% of the novel developing real-world backstory for everybody, world building, planting story threads, and justifying why the main character and his friends will be spending the rest of the novel in-game, kind of in a long-term situation. But I kind of thought it was cool still. From the 25% mark on, the majority of the story takes place in game, with only occasional drops back into the real world. The main character and his friends go on adventures. They use their new full immersion rigs to develop some great skills in game, and use intelligent tactics to beat both player killers and non-player characters, and monsters. In addition to dungeon diving, there's a little bit of crafting. Definitely a good section of town building, magical theory, and player versus player action. One of the true highlights of the novel, at least to me, are definitely the combat scenes. They're not like visceral, interesting, in that they're like super descriptive and like you could feel every motion and cut and stab. Rather, I like them because of the truly interesting tactics that the characters use in their fights. The main character and his group take on opponents that are consistently higher level of themselves, but instead of using some magic sword of unbeatableness, they instead combine their skills in intelligent ways to create powerful combos. And in all honesty, the intelligent exploitation of the game mechanics remind me of the magic and combat system of flexible systems like Divinity Original Sin rather. I'm currently playing Divinity Original Sin 2, so that's why I'm making the comparison. In those games, you can kind of combine different magical abilities and powers to create some new effects that are more powerful than their individual parts. And that's kind of what you see here in this particular combat system. The main characters combine their powers and abilities to make like some really unusual combos. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Usually you don't see that. There are also some very funny scenes in the novel. I won't spoil them for you, but one involves a rabbit who's super vicious and funny, and then a slew, and other characters make fun of him for it. I'm also a big fan of the character Fibble, and my only complaint is that I wish he would have been introduced sooner in the story because he's super funny, super hilarious, and once you get to him, you're like, oh, well, he's might become your favorite character. At least he was for me. So keep you. Okay. Again, now I'm on to the things that aren't quite perfect in the novel, and even these aren't like these break the story for me. They're more like, I can see that this is the author's first novel that he's ever written. So first of all, this is a huge story. I mean, like 650 pages at least. And when as a reader, honestly, even as me, I'm like, when I look at this novel, I'm like, I'm kind of intimidated. That's a lot of novel to take in at once. And so just as somebody who reviews a ton of stories, like 650 pages, like that's like a couple other novels sizes, and that's one thing. Also, as I was reading the story, like part of me was like in editing mode, and I'm like, a number of these scenes in the story just aren't necessary for the story to progress. I'm not saying they're poorly written or that they're uninteresting. It's just that they don't move the plot forward, and so they kind of slow the story down. Especially sometimes in the story where it's like an action scene, and then like it drops out for like a history lesson almost, and then it goes back to like the regular story. And I'm like that totally will break someone's immersion level in the story because it entirely shifts perspective, and sometimes even tenses in the story. I'm like, okay, that's a little jarring, and also like that scene is like kind of not needed. Like it's nice if you like history and stuff. Um, like you can see, like there were some editing choices that could have been made to make this a little smoother, and like that's okay. Like not every novel's perfect. Heck, I know I've written a couple. I'm like, okay, there are things you learn as you go through the process. Okay, just a couple examples to show you what I'm talking about. Mid-story, again, the novel cuts away from the story, the main storyline, to a historical recounting of making real-world money from playing MMOs. The author describes gold farming, various ways that players sell gear, power level other characters, and a slew of other similar options. He then goes on to describe the way the game companies have dealt with these practices and forces them into kind of a black market system, and how this game company for IO Online decided to allow players to make real world money as a part of the game. There are even some math models described, and it's really interesting stuff. I mean, I actually enjoyed reading it. It's just that it takes up like 3% of the novel, which is like for a 650-page story, it's like 18, 19 pages of a story. And now another example is that, and again, there are like smaller scenes where it's like, oh, maybe could have cut that, where it's like NPC character development. And I'm like, it's not necessarily bad, but it's well, I'll give you an example early on. Like early on, there's a scene where where Headguard and his alchemist wife have lunch or dinner with like the main characters, and I kind of had a question while I was reading it, like, are these going to be recurring characters? Are they important to give names? And like, why are the characters in this like couple percentage points, like 10, 15 pages, of like, oh, this is just like a dinner scene. Like, okay, that's well, a better example is like later on when the king of the kingdom, for no real apparent reason, decides to visit a town that the main character and his friends are helping to rebuild. It's a cute scene. I'm not saying it's not, but it shows like, oh, this is a great king. He cares about his people and the well-being of them. But again, it takes up like 3% of the story, which is another 18, 19 pages. And I have to say, like, compared to the what's developed for the main characters, like there's more time spent with the king, who doesn't really have any impact on the story. Like, than there are for like the six main characters in the novel. Like when you spend more time on the main on an NPC than it does on developing backstory and character development for some of the main characters, I'm like, that seems like it might be unnecessary for the progress of the story. So I'm like, okay, just small things like that. Again, these are a couple examples, but I easily marked a good 100 pages that could have been edited out of the novel to improve the pacing and to just kind of get to the good scenes, like the action scenes or the humor scenes, or the scenes that develop, the storyline for the main characters and their character arc. And again, these aren't like things that break the story for me in any way, shape, or form. I like them all. I'm just like, oh, these are things that could have been improved, and that's all they really are. Overall, good story, very funny scenes, intelligent fights, especially good characters. I had a good time. Get the score 7 out of 10 for me. So there you go. Enjoyable. Okay. On to our next review. I'm probably saying this title wrong. Sphiel song. Sphiel. A LitRPG virtual fantasy adventure written by Alara Branwen. Okay, this is in the unexplored fantasy universe. So if you've read any of those other stories, there is sexual content in this novel. So there are graphic sex scenes. So just be aware that if that's not the kind of story you're interested in or it bothers you, you just skip this novel. I'll read you the author's description. 3 years ago, a bright and vibrant Mandy Sutherland looked forward to life, ready to take on the world after graduating high school with top honors and gaining acceptance to a great college. However, on graduation night, the world went hazy and she passed out. After awakening in the hospital, doctors told her that she had a severe medical condition that would render her unable to function in social situations. Now she lives secluded in a room, looked after by her little sister, Natalie, and her father, although working with her psychiatrist, Dr. Braun, to combat her severe anxiety. Time has produced no breakthroughs. During one of our online sessions, Dr. Brown suggests an experimental type of therapy using virtual reality to stimulate social situations. Simulate. Seeing no other option, Mandy agrees. Mandy finds she can function in Unexplored, a fantasy VR MMORPG, and she takes the role of Sphiel, a beautiful elf woman living in the Wilderwood. During her adventures, she makes friends, uncovers mystical secrets, and combats great enemies. However, even as she grows, she wonders if she can face her greatest enemy of all, herself. She also has sex. So there you go. Again, this is a standalone novel in the unexplored universe, so it doesn't actually connect directly to the other stories. Uh, um, and yeah, this is. I like the premise of this novel. I'll be upfront. I always like the idea of using virtual reality in unique ways, including therapy. Um, and that premise is cool. It is. Unfortunately, this is not done well in this particular story, in this novel, I should say. And this kind of made it my least favorite novel in the series. And to be honest, I'm sort of getting tired of this series in general, just because I'm seeing the same kind of storyline in every single one of them. And it feels like it's getting a little repetitive, especially since I don't enjoy the sex scenes as much as other people do, who just might enjoy the series for those reasons, for that combination of RPG and sex stuff. But again, I skip the sex stuff, so it's less interesting to me. And the thing that kind of the story doesn't do well is the therapy stuff. The therapy kind of amounts to the main character Mandy logging into Unexplored, killing a bunch of goblins and other monsters, and then getting laid and having sex, and that fixes her. And I'm not saying there's not like there is sort of a reference to immersion therapy in the novel, where gradually she fights harder and harder monsters and comes into contact with other people at some point. But that's it. I mean, it's not. I, I guess part of it is judging it by comparison, which may or may not be fair, in that I've read other stories that also use virtual reality therapy, and they actually have therapists. And there are tailored situations where the main character goes to particular scenarios to combat depression or combat other phobias, and it feels like it's more customized as opposed to just dropping a person into a random virtual reality game and her fighting monsters and have sex. I'm like that. It seems less therapy to me. And if you want a story that also does this, but I think does it better, is it's Continue Online. Continue Online does, in a way, have this same kind of concept of virtual reality as a form of therapy. In that case, it's kind of combats severe depression, suicidal tendencies, and that's part of that storyline as well, using virtual reality to deal with those issues. Um, and I think it does it better. And maybe that's part of the reason why I didn't enjoy this novel as much, because one, I read other stories do better, and two, that same theme of having a main character who has an issue and then logging into this game, and then their problems basically being solved by adventuring and having sex, and is kind of what I've seen again and again from the author. I'm like, at, for 3 or 4 times, I think this is the fourth novel in the series, like all the ones that she's written for this particular unexplored universe. It's kind of been the same storyline again and again. So I'm like, at some point, I'm like, I think I'm just getting tired of it. But for me, I didn't have a great time with it. Other people might enjoy it a lot more. There are some people who really do enjoy this series, and good for you if you do. I'm just not one of them, unfortunately. I'm giving it a score of a meh, 5 out of 10. There you go. Okay, on to our next story, which is going to be Galen Wolfe's Dark World London. Not a huge fan of the cover art, personally. It doesn't really tell me much about the story, but the novel and the story itself are pretty cool to me. I'll read you the author's description. In the real world, it's 2027. A disgruntled lone world data analyst, Adam Harker, works for a corporation he hates. In this dystopian future, many seek to lose themselves in virtual reality games, but Adam is dead set against playing Darkworlds, designed by mega corporation Miskatonic Games, until he's tempted by two quite different people from two wholly different reasons. In the game, it's 1927, and Adam Harker is in London battling against minions of Cthulhu, but then come hints and suggestions that something else stirs, something wicked and secret, something new rising up and replicating itself within the code and taking on the form of ageless evil. Hidden knowledge leads Adam through a series of terrifying revelations as he searches from London to Glastonbury and into the Dreamlands. Join Adam as he fights to save his friends and maybe even the world itself from the horrors that lurk in the game. So there you go. This is a Cthulhu. I think the author describes that as a Cthulhu RPG. story. So there you go. It is 348 pages, $2.09. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And again, the cover art does not just do justice to the story. I've read other novels that attempt to combine a period piece setting and or use like a Lovecraft theme, and this is the best one that I've read so far. The game mechanics aren't hidden; they're rather both the reader and the player learn about them in the very first pages of the story. So, like upfront about, oh, here are the actual game mechanics, and they go through the entire novel. So I'm like, okay, I know right off the bat, LitRPG. There are specific stats like health and mana, but there are also some Lovecraft specific ones like sanity and reputation. That as they deplete in the novel, there are actual effects to the character. And again, there are video games and RPG games in the world, tabletop and MTC, that do Lovecraft stories, and so these mechanics are already existed. So it's nice that the author did the research and pulled them into the game. So as characters in the game lose sanity from either seeing weird Cthulhu stuff or doing, things, their the things that they experience in the game will change. For example, they'll see hallucinations or they're, start acting weird. Same thing with reputation in the game. If the characters lose enough reputation from doing things society deems as illegal and mad, they can be arrested or killed by guards in the game. So, the stats actually matter. And I thought that was kind of cool. And another thing the author does very early in the novel is that he takes a page from tabletop experiences. And part of character creation in the story involves creating a backstory for the character. That determines what type of profession they're going to have, and it's a whole scene of like, oh, I want to use magic. So I grew up in this particular part of London and in this particular class and had these particular experiences. And that leads to the main character kind of finding the profession that fits that backstory. So I thought that was kind of cool as well. So you also, the game system is really flexible, and that there are trainable skills that provide a wide variety of character builds. So you could have a priest with healing powers, but also specializes in pistols, or a private eye who has knowledge of ancient artifacts and German. It just depends on what the characters are going to invest their skill points to get every level. And so the combos are pretty endless, and I kind of like that flexibility as well. Um, Okay, now in the actual story, whenever you write for a specific time period, you kind of risk losing an interest of anybody who's not into that type. I'm personally, I'm not in general a huge fan of the 1920s. Like in the U.S., it's always the Prohibition era, so gangsters and rum running, that kind of stuff. Not that interesting. But the author does a really good job of combining like 1920s London with a lot of supernatural elements. And so it feels very period piece urban fantasy almost. So it's not just like historical references. They are there, I'm saying. But it's also like, oh, there's a Lovecraft vibe. There's a supernatural element that kind of lends itself to kind of 1920s urban fantasy vibe, which I kind of thought was cool as well. And the Lovecraft elements are there in spades, even bleeding into the real life part of the story. So I thought that was kind of neat as well. And again, the real life parts of the story are at least as interesting as the novel portions. So they're neat. They're not a big part of the story. I mean, he comes in and out of the game, but most of the story does take place inside of the game. And even the real life story part, the 2027 London dystopian thing, I thought was kind of cool because it sets the theme of like dystopian corporations exploiting people, and the things in the game affecting real life potentially, including like death and loss of sanity. I'm like, oh, that's a neat kind of twist on stuff happening in the game happening in real life. So there you go. Overall, good story. Had a really good time with it. Does a great job of incorporating game mechanics into a creepy Lovecraft story. The novel does say it's like a horror story. I didn't find it to be too horrorish. Like it's not like graphic horror. It's more like psychological horror. So otherwise, I don't think I would have enjoyed it if it was like Saw graphic horror. So there you go. Gets a score of 7 out of 10 from me. I enjoyed it. Okay, on to our next review. It is Morningwood. Everybody Loves Large Chests by Nevin Iliev. Yep. The author's description. Large chests are said to encompass all manner of hopes and dreams. Men covet them, women envy them, but one fact holds true. Everyone wants to get their hands on some big ones. The same holds true for an intrepid adventurer, a strapping young lad by the name of Himmel. Armed with his grandfather's trusty longsword and the dream of being the strongest, he sets out on the journey of a lifetime. It is sure to be a long and dangerous road fraught with danger, and it all starts with a simple test. Reach level 5 in the dungeon called the Newbie Zone, and earn the right to become a full-fledged adventurer. However, such things get hopelessly derailed when his adolescent mind beholds an exposed chest for the first time. A fateful meeting that would inevitably lead his life in a direction he never dreamed of. Content warning, profanity, gore, and sexual themes. There are less sexual themes than you would think there. There's a lot of innuendo. And even in the author's description, the double entendre of like, oh, large chest, like breast and treasure chest is obviously there. But I'll let you know that the sexual themes are mild by comparison to like some of the other sex LitRPG novels. There are literally a handful of sentences that do it, and I'll let you know percentage-wise when they come up in the story later on in the review. But full disclosure, the author sent me an advanced copy for review. I pre-ordered the novel. So by the time you see this particular review, it should be out, and I'll have already purchased it. So there you go. The story was originally written on the Royal Road, and it's kind of a fan favorite with some people. A lot of people either like love the story or they hate it, and it's just one of those things. It is available now as an ebook. The author notes that there are slight differences between the online version and this one, not story-wise apparently, but apparently this volume 1 contains the first 3 arcs of the series. The author has spent a lot of time apparently cleaning up the grammar and spelling errors, and that the lewd scenes are toned down a lot for the novel version. So if you've read the online version, you might want to give this one a shot to see what the differences are, if there are any. And again, this one is a little controversial because there's a lot of sexual innuendo and a lot of sex jokes without a ton of actual sex. And the story is told from the monster's perspective, and there really isn't a plot. There's not. It's one of those daily adventure stories, just told from the monster's perspective. So if you don't mind those kind of stories, you might enjoy this. The monster in this instance is a mimic who imitates a treasure chest. You basically follow his adventures as he lives in a dungeon, kills adventurers, levels up, gains new powers, and that's kind of it. And if you're cool with that, great. If you're not, you're not. I personally don't mind. It was kind of something easy to chill with, as I'm like reading and like been doing other things. I could plug it in and like do the dishes or do laundry or whatever. And I don't feel like I have to like pay like 100% attention to it because it is just, monster killing, monster going on adventures, monster getting levels, and eventually like some other new aspects of the story, progress into it. Like things change and it keeps being different and adding new things so that it's so interesting by the end of the story. But again, there is a ton of sexual innuendo, but there is actual sexual content as well. At the 46% mark, at the 58% mark, and at the 63% mark, there's actual sex. And it's a little bit graphic. But overall, there's literally only probably 5 or 6 sentences in total that have actual sex content. But if that's not something you're interested in, you can either skip it because you now know the percentages, or you can just not pick up the book, I guess. But you are missing out on something that I thought was kind of neat. For me, it was entertaining, and it was just fun to read about the different ways that a monster would level up as opposed to a regular adventurer. So I liked the change of pace a little bit. So there you go. I enjoyed it. Get to score 7 out of 10 for me. There you go. Okay, on to our last review, and honestly, I considered for a hot second not doing the review because this novel doesn't really exist anymore. Nemesis, the Panguardia Online Saga Book 1, written by Lori Joe Bryant. And mostly because the ebook version is gone. There's only a print version that says out of stock on Amazon at this point, but it does still exist. And I think it's good to keep record of these kind of situations for future reference or for future authors who, somebody may consider that this is a thing they want to do. And maybe by looking at this review and seeing, people caught them, that it will change their minds. I'm not going to bother reading the author's description because it doesn't matter. It's not original. The ebook was 318 pages. It was a whole $1.99. It was available on Kindle Unlimited, and the story is basically when this novel came out, it was up for pre. I put it up on the upcoming LitRPG list for literally months. So I kind of felt responsible for getting any pre-orders for the author or promoting it in any shape or form. I felt bad about it. But here's the story is basically that even before the novel came out, somebody noticed that the author's description for this novel was eerily similar to what was for another series called Viridian Gate Online Cataclysm, the first book in that series. And like and when you compared them side by side, you're like, oh, these are very very similar, or like almost word for word, but like with proper name changed. And so there were concerns that maybe this author had plagiarized part of the plot or part of the story for reading it online. And so just even before it came out, it had kind of had a negative reputation because of that. And later on, the author changed the description entirely to feel a little more original. And so we thought, okay, maybe the author just made a bad description choice or something, right? But because of this concern, I did something I don't normally do. I actually asked an author for an advance review copy. Usually, it's the case of like, oh, an author's like, oh, I have a novel coming out. Do you want to get an advance copy for it? And I'm like, ah, sure, why not? But I never asked for them. Actually, because I'll when the novel comes out, I'll just purchase it anyways, and I'll review it at that point. But in this case, I took the proactive step of, hey, shoot an email off to like, hey, I'm the LitRPG Podcast. Would you mind sending me an advance copy for review? I'd be happy to give you an honest review in exchange for your for the advance copy. And I was super surprised the author said yes, especially when there were rumors about plagiarism. I thought, oh, okay, maybe this is the author saying, here's my stuff. Read, judge it for yourself. But like quickly into the novel, fears were confirmed. And I truly went into the story like trying to be fair and just hoping that the novel was just inspired maybe by reading it online or video, as I'm going to say it from now on. But from the very first pages, you can tell that there is some very big similarities. And to be clear, Nemesis is not a word-for-word copy of Reading It Online. The author very carefully rewords every single sentence. And this is likely to avoid setting off automatic plagiarism checks. And I did one for the story, and it came back like 10% possibly plagiarized. So the author did a really good job of like, changing every single word or every single sentence structure. And that took a lot of work. I'm like, that seems... I mean, it really is like it's like she went through the entire novel and re-edited the entire thing. I'm like, that's a lot of work. She changed everybody's name, changed their gender often, but all the plot points in the story are exactly the same for Reading Gate Online. Paragraph by paragraph, the exact same ideas are conveyed. Even the jokes in the story are copied or like modified, and sometimes not very well, but sometimes it's just a straight rip. There are a few exceptions in the novel where things are different, though. So, in the character creation section, between 6 and 8% points in the novel, the race selections are only peripherally similar to what's in VGO. And there's the addition of character sheets for each race. And part of this, I think she might have done more work in that first 10% just because that's what people download as a sample. So maybe she don't want to make it so obvious that it was a copy. Another exception is at the 10% mark, between 10 and 12%. She didn't. This is an entirely different scene, but it's ripped from a different story. It's actually ripped from Ascend Online, the 4% at the 4% mark in that story. After the main character goes through character creation, she's dropped in a game and finds herself immediately fighting off green monsters. And she's given the quest to defend the town from more green monsters. And shortly after that, she's knocked out and wakes up in a prison, putting her back on track with the VGO storyline. But I thought that was really interesting that, not only did she plagiarize from VGO, she plagiarized from another novel, Ascend Online. I'm like, okay, that's double dipping there, lady. And from that point on, it really is just like a paragraph by paragraph rewording of the Viridian Gate Online story. I have a couple examples, in the full review where you can kind of see side by side that this is the case, and I encourage you to go check that out. There's like literally, I think, have 3 big sections of like pieces from both Viridian Gate Online and the comparison to this novel Nemesis, including the percentage points where they are in the story, so you can kind of see for yourself where the similarities are. But again, it really is just take a paragraph, reword it, change proper names, change genders, and that's the only difference. It's a paragraph by paragraph copy in theme. And so, like, this is absolute plagiarism. And I think part of the story for the review, I should say, or for the larger context, is that when people read this, because I made a point of having this review ready when this novel came out, which was like this past weekend. And I'm glad that I did, because people were justifiably upset when they read the review online on Facebook, on Twitter, or wherever the case was it was posted at. Like, every author who had any, you know, this is kind of a fear for authors everywhere, especially when you're doing a self-publishing situation, in that you don't have the resources to like sue somebody for copyright infringement or for plagiarizing your stuff. And so it's a huge fear, like, especially when you're giving your story to beta readers, or to to who, and there's always that fear in the back of your mind, like, are they going to steal my story? Are they going to like publish it themselves and claim it as original, and then they're going to credit off my work? And like, that's always part of like the author fear. As an author myself, I totally get that fear, and I think a lot of other authors online did as well, because it kind of blew up as far as like in the community of LitRPG, like people like very quickly, checking it out for themselves and like leaving bad reviews, so much to the point that the authors kind of disappeared from the online world, as far as a lot of us can tell. Like, her ebook disappeared within like the day. The only thing that you can kind of see still is the print version of it, and it says out of stock. So obviously she pulled it from CreateSpace or wherever it was. But even then, you can see the reviews that I gave, and other people who looked at it were, as soon as the publish gave. Um, and everybody's like very clear, like, this is plagiarism. This is somebody taking someone else's work, rewording it, and presenting it as their own. And everybody's really clear on that. That's not cool. And so I'm happy to see that there was an effect from this review and from other people taking action, and kind of ostracizing the person, in very clearly saying that plagiarism is not cool, and it definitely isn't. Like, the amount of work that went into doing this kind of plagiarism, like that could have been effort put into making your own novel, because the author's writing wasn't bad. Like, her rewording wasn't horrible. It really wasn't. She might have a flair for writing in some respect, but the fact that it was just that focus was dedicated to ripping someone else's work off and trying to benefit from it, that is not cool. And I'm happy to see that the community kind of banded around the author for reading it online, and said this is not okay. So I'm thankful to see that the story basically doesn't exist anymore, and that Amazon took steps to either drop it out, or the author did it herself. And so that is a nice conclusion to this particular podcast and to the review. So thank you, everybody, for hanging out. And again, if you want to see the actual like sections where the comparison made, go to either the Facebook page for the LitRPG Podcast. You can see the review there, or for the show notes for this particular podcast. It's all in there, like the full show notes. So thanks for hanging out with me, everybody. This was kind of an interesting episode. But again, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Patreon. There are a bunch of places you can follow the show. And also, if you want to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you can find out all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. And thanks again for hanging out with me today, ladies and gentlemen. And until we can hang out again, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.